take a look at DMS, one of the most important flavour characters in lager beer. Now, it's uncommon for us to use an abbreviation to describe a flavour, but this is the term used in the internationally recognised vocabulary of beer. And the DMS stands for dimethyl sulfide. Now, interestingly, many chemists don't call this compound dimethyl sulfide, they call it methyl sulfide. It's the same compound, but two different names. DMS originates in two ways in beer. First of all, it comes from the malt. Malt can contain a precursor called S-methylmethionine, a type of amino acid. And when we're boiling the wort, the S-methylmethionine breaks down and releases DMS. Now, when that happens during wort boiling, the DMS evaporates off and doesn't give us a problem with the flavour of DMS in beer. It's when we transfer our wort to the whirlpool, which is still, it's not boiling, and it's not evaporating the DMS. That's when the DMS accumulates. And we can therefore, from holding up the wort in the whirlpool, get too high a level of DMS in the beer. The second source of DMS, though, is the growth of contaminant bacteria during fermentation. These so-called coliform bacteria, gram-negative bacteria that grow during the fermentation. They grow during the early stages of the fermentation. And they convert a second precursor coming from malt, called dimethyl sulfoxide, or DMSO. They convert the DMSO into DMS and can form huge levels of DMS in the beer, giving a very unusual bacterial flavour character to the beer. Now, when we're picking up DMS as a sulfur compound, it's very easy to become accustomed to the flavour and adapted to the flavour. The more we smell it, the less we'll find it. So this is a flavour to take a short sniff of and move the glass away. If you were to go in and take a deep sniff, then you become blind to the flavour. So either move the glass under your nose like this while sniffing, or move it away as you sniff, as the best way to find it. You're looking for a smell that reminds you of sweet corn, or cooked corn, or baked beans, or even tomato ketchup. DMS is found in all of those products, which is why it reminds us of them. It's also found in oysters, and it's found in truffles. So it's a compound which is quite widely dispersed in nature, as well as in beer. Now, in traditional German lagers, DMS is an important flavour. It gives a fresh, corny, malty character to the beer. It's also found in some traditional ale styles. Some Belgian ales, for example, have quite high levels of DMS. However, in modern lager beer and in modern craft ale, generally we're looking for very low levels of DMS. The way we control that level is primarily by buying raw materials, malt, with a low level of DMS precursor, the S-methylmethionine. And if the level is low, our potential for forming it in the brewhouse is low too. But secondly, we have to minimise that whirlpool stand time to minimise the formation of DMS in the brewhouse, specifically in the whirlpool. The next thing we have to do is make sure we're running a clean brewery, because if we have bacteria present in the fermentation, we're going to form DMS. So keep your fermenters clean, keep your yeast free of contaminants to avoid the DMS character. Now, why is it important? Well, consumers generally won't pick out so easily and name this character, but they'll recognise the beer is different than last time. And you, of course, want to make your beer in a consistent way. If the consumers enjoy it once, let them enjoy it again and again in the same way. Low concentrations of DMS, levels that will hardly find the flavour at all, are in the range of 30 to 50 micrograms per litre. High levels can be as high as 100 or 120 micrograms per litre. That could be typical of some types of German Pilsner, which contain a high level of DMS. There is one aspect of beer flavour that affects the perception of DMS, and that's the level of 2-phenylethanol in beer, an aromatic higher alcohol produced by some strains of yeast. And when the beer is rich in phenylethanol, the DMS is less noticeable. So that's why when you measure with gas chromatography, the same level of DMS in beer may give you a different perceived level of intensity. So DMS, sometimes a positive character, sometimes a negative character, but a flavour that we have a good means of control. Of course, to control it, the key thing is to learn to taste it and to recognise it. People will most often confuse this flavour with other sulphur compounds, for example, methyl thioacetate produced by yeast. It smells of cooked vegetables or cooked cauliflower. Slightly different in terms of its flavour character, but very different in terms of its origin. To tell one from the other, you have to taste them side by side to learn to recognise them.